Yeah, fortunate that I'm just too old for this crap. Too old for TikTok, thankfully.
Hey, this is The Big Story. Thanks for listening. This week, I'm in the Big Apple. I drove up from Asheville to meet my wife when she came back from Portugal. We hadn't been in Manhattan together for a while, and this was our best chance for the foreseeable future. Having lived here for 25 years makes this my de facto hometown. So spending our time eating, hanging out with friends, and hitting the bookstores was on top of our to-do list. Another was taking advantage of the time away from my daily routine. I find the punching in and punching out nature makes it hard for me to really find the clarity for my work. I get a lot of thinking done when I'm traveling. Be it observational or reflective, I seem to make the connections that elude me otherwise. This week's guest is artist and writer Andi Watson. After seeing the beautiful images of his graphic novel with Simon Gain, Sunburn, on Twitter last year, I tracked the book down, where upon reading it, I found the writing as beautiful as the imagery, and no surprise, I'm a big fan now. Andi is a thoughtful and prolific creator who bakes meaning and subtext into all of his stories, and we can all use more of that in our life, I'm sure. I know I can. All right, this is me and Andi Watson. Am I growing up? I don't know. I don't want to grow up.
It creeps up on us all eventually.
It does. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the north of England in a small town near a city called Leeds. It used to be a mining town, and then kind of one of my formative experiences really was the decline of the mining industry, and they had the whole changes in the culture that the mines were shut down and there were strikes and lots of strife and drama. And yeah, I grew up in the middle of that. I was a teenager then, and then I was kind of, I never wanted to work down a mine or anything like that, but it really did kind of solidify the idea that I wanted to pursue art because it was the only thing I was interested in really, and the only thing I was any good at. And that kind of set me apart from most of my friends, because then I knew if I wanted to do art, then I kind of realized I had to go to college, and then I had to do A-levels, which is the equivalent of high school in the US. So yeah, from like maybe 12 onwards, I kind of had an idea of what my path would be, and it was different from what my friends would do, and it was different from what my family had done. So I was the first member of my immediate family to go to college, and it was art that took me there really. Otherwise, until then, I'd kind of wanted to be a car engineer, someone who fixed cars, even though I'm incredibly useless at anything practical. So I don't know where I got that idea from. But yeah, I wanted to be a mechanic. I was going to be a mechanic despite having no aptitude and no facility for it whatsoever. I can barely change a light bulb. So, but yeah, eventually I did realize that, yeah, art was the only thing that really interested me. So, so that set me on a course for life, really, that I had to, do education longer than I thought I would, because I'm not really academic at all, really. I have a hard time taking in facts and information via books, via words. I mean, visually, I'm okay. But this whole new horizon opened up, and then I knew that I had to work to do just enough to get to graduate high school, and then just enough to do a foundation course. In the UK, you go from high school to do 1 year of art foundation course, where it's kind of like a boot camp where they teach you all the basics and kind of kick all the stupid things that you think you want to do and what you think you know when you're 18, and then you cross that border into, okay, this is serious. It's like the introduction to Fame, the TV show, this is where it gets serious and start paying in sweat kind of thing. And, I couldn't have my rotring pen renderings of ninjas anymore. That just wasn't cut it. I'm going to have to open my mind to a broader interpretation of art. So, yeah, I did a year of a foundation course, which totally blew my mind and totally opened up art to me. And then I did a degree in illustration and graphic design, specializing in illustration. And then towards the end of that, I made the fatal decision to get lured. The siren song of comics called me, even though I'd never intended to make comics, because it just looked too incredibly difficult and ridiculously hard work. And, the people that I liked, Jaime Hernandez, the Love and Rockets and stuff, I thought, this is crazy. You'll never be as good as this guy. This guy, he's incredible. You'll just never be this good. Why would you do this? But then I did do it. So, yeah. And here I am, 30 years later, 3 decades later, still trying to get good at this thing. So, but that's the reason I've kept at it, really, is that it's so difficult. There's so many different things you need to master that I'm still interested. I'm still challenged by it. And so I'm still pushing.
Yeah. It is incredibly hard, let alone writing a comic book. I mean, that's hard enough to begin with. Drawing one is hard and laborious. Like, all these tasks are compounding. So the more you want to control your vision, your expression, that's just another, like, slap on another 100 pounds on that bar and get to work. It's so much more to do. And I want to unpack all that stuff because there was so much in there. First, you grew up in a mining area. So, I mean, this is a very physical, people working, literally in dark holes for their livelihood. And how did you view yourself in the context? I mean, because like you mentioned that you wanted to fix cars and kind of be in that realm initially, but that seems applicable. That seems like, an apples and apples kind of world. But then you say, hey, I want to do art. What was that like, being like the art kid? Because I know what it was like being the art kid, but I didn't grow up in a blue collar world.
It was a bit weird, and it still is weird. My parents still don't really get what I do. And it did. I mean, it has had kind of long-term consequences in that I feel divorced from my upbringing in certain, I'm slightly, unmoored, maybe. It has been odd, and I'm still kind of trying to not been a dramatic, traumatic experience or anything, but I do feel separate to the way I grew up and slightly separate from the people I grew up with, in that I had this thing that I was interested in, and it led me, into the wider world. It led me into museums. It led me into art galleries. It led me into literature. It led me into music. All these other areas that I became interested in. I really haven't really figured it out in my own head, but it was kind of a parting. There's kind of a chasm that I feel like I'm slightly on one side of a big, not a Grand Canyon, but and then my upbringing, my family are kind of on the other, because I grew up blue collar, working class, not at all kind of artistic at all. I grew up with very few books in the house initially. My kind of lifeline really was the public library and television and comic books to some extent, books as well, and then school. So, it was weird for me, and I don't. It was really hard to piece with that.
Listening to you say that, and then having read your works, I also see that reflected in the work that you create. There is this outsider quality that you put into your protagonists and place them into situations where they have to find a way to navigate this unknown realm. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think if you look at Sunburn and you look at the book tour, they're both about individuals who are taken from one particular milieu and placed into another, and they don't really know the rules particularly well, and they have to figure out this new world and what the values are. And that's definitely something that chimes with me, in that I moved from like this I mean, went to college. So, I mean, college art school in the UK has always been kind of a way for working class kids to bootstrap themselves up the education system without being academic. So, you know, I was really mixing with people who are much more middle class than me, much better educated. I mean, I went to a not great school. My academic record is not fantastic. So, yeah, it was definitely weird. I had to, like, figure out, what are these people like? And, and understand their experiences, which were quite different to mine about, we go to the theatre every week with my parents and all this kind of stuff, which was just something I'd never experienced. That's just, like, completely out of my realm. But, so particularly in the book tour, like, alienation is a definite theme of that book. In fact, it's the overriding theme of kind of one person who's kind of completely lost the world, and it doesn't quite work the way he thinks it should do. And that's an exaggeration of some kind of my own experience, I guess, in some way. And you just kind of build up the tension, increase the stakes. The stakes for me were very different, very small scale, but for a character within a drama, you want to kind of exaggerate, but then also for me always have that core of lived experience or something to anchor it, that I feel like I understand this person some way, even if it's just a small kernel of who they are. And then when I have that kind of key maybe, or the seed of I understand that this comes from a real place, then I can build on that. I can push the snowball down the hill, and it builds and it builds and it builds.
Yeah. I think one of the best parts about writing a story is that maybe you have a premise and a character, and once you start sort of really kind of putting yourself in that space of the character within that premise and the environment, and you start to feel their choices, you start to feel their personality come out. And, these are sort of qualities of ourselves that may not be fully expressed in our daily life, but maybe we can be more bold, or we can be more thoughtful, or whatever the thing is. And it's really a wonderful surprise as the story unfolds before you. You're sort of the first preview reader of your own story.
Can be revealing in ways that aren't very flattering to you as well. So, you never know what kind of horrible aspects of yourself you may be revealing in your fiction.
Yeah, it's funny reading Sunburn. Just remember seeing images of the book kind of popping up here and there, like on Twitter or wherever it was for a while. And I just kept going, I got to read this book. And if you haven't read the book, buy it, read it. It is a wonderful book. And I think I posted the other day, I mean, it's a great book to read during the winter. Like, it's this kind of, it really does warm you up just looking at it and reading it. But there's this underlying sort of tension and menace early enough into the story where this countertonal note is struck and it's ringing for a long time. And you just keep going, when is this going to resolve? Like, I need this to resolve, which was just such a wonderful kind of overlay to the work. I really applaud you and your co-conspirator in pulling that off. Yeah.
Thank you. That's one of those great things about collaborating with Simon is, he's amazing at playing beautiful landscapes, beautiful people. He can do all kinds of things. But for this story, it needed attractive people, wonderfully designed cars, lovely clothes, everything, the exteriors, the materials had to be beautiful and seductive. And then I was kind of working slightly against that as well. So, it's one of those great things about comics that, the visuals are doing one thing and maybe the words or the subtext is doing another. And when two people are working together like that, it's just really cool, because I'm used to working on my own, like doing everything. Like we were talking about Cliff Chang. But working with a with someone like Simon, it's such a treat that you both get to do your thing, and then it's more than the sum of the parts. You just create something new between you. I don't think I certainly can do what Simon does. I'm not sure Simon can quite do what I do, but together we have this two-headed monster thing, which can pull off something like Sunburn, which I couldn't do on my own for sure.
It's super wonderful, and it really does. It's a transporting, piece of work. You do get to go somewhere and be somewhere and be in another. It really felt like reading a book, if that is the alliterative way of putting it. I enjoyed that. So, but you do both. You're not just writing and you're not just drawing. You're doing both. You're sort of, filling the buckets, multiple buckets with different tasks. Let's just say you're naturally averagely busy. Like, what does your work week and day look like as a creative person?
Just work does dominate. It's part of the nature of the medium that it's labor intensive, and I wake up and I'll check my email and then have some breakfast, then I'll start work. And it depends on what kind of project I'm working on and the stage of the project. At the minute, I'm working on a middle grade book for HarperCollins. It is, it's a much different process to working on something like the book tour. The book tour, I just decided that I had this idea. I absolutely had to do it. There was no way that I could not do this book. So I just sat down, I wrote it, I thumbnailed it, and I started drawing it. I did an awful lot of editing, and I didn't consult a single person in the entire process. So I spent maybe 12 months, maybe longer. And it wasn't until I'd finished. I didn't even show it to my wife or anyone. I finished it, and then I showed it to some publishers to varying results. So I went through this whole process on my own without showing or sharing any of it. And then at the end, I tried to get it published. I had no idea that it would get published. I had doubts that it would find a publisher. And in fact, I was kind of at the end of the road in that thinking, maybe I can't do this anymore because there's just not an outlet for me. There's not a publisher. There's not an audience for a book like this or someone who does different things like I do. But anyway, so that was the book tour. That was a very different experience to what I'm doing now. Today, I'm working on thumbnails for a middle grade book, which is a funny fantasy book called Punicorn for HarperCollins, which is one of the big 5 publishers, and working with editors and within an editorial workflow within a big bureaucratic structure is totally different to doing something like a book tour, in that I have to provide synopses of stories, multiple drafts. Then I have to do a script with thumbnails, and they're not thumbnails like I would do for something like the book tour, which just scribbles, chicken scratch. Only I can really see what they are. I have to produce something close to pencils, I'd say, what I consider pencils anyway, with a script typed out, and then so this is what I'm in the middle of right now. So that's the entire book. That's 220 pages of making what is in my head be something that is visible to editors, is understandable to editors, and is editable by editors and can fit within a workflow. So I work on a iPad on Procreate, and then I create the files digitally for the book tour. It was all on pen and paper and pencil. The scripts were literally just a legal pad. I'd chicken scratch out a thumbnail of the page, and then I'd scribble out the dialogue in pencil and then kind of cross it out and all the rest of it. Whereas this, it's much more structured. It has to be way more clarified. My thinking has to be much clearer, and I'm basically communicating the book not just to the readers, but to the editors before the readers. And then there's kind of feedback that comes in, notes, changes. So yeah, that's what I'm doing today. And it is a really big kind of culture shift from what I do on books of my own. And
sure. I was just curious how because a lot of people who I talk to who are writers and artists, the way that they write the books is this hybrid between drawing and writing, where they start structuring the narrative through layout, and sort of so you can kind of get your pacing, underway. Do you work in that fashion?
I do for my own books, yeah, and I prefer that method because it's much more organic. You have give and take in the different areas. You draw something, you find a character, and that influences the writing, and vice versa. It's much more organic process. You're discovering as you go, discovering every step of the way. So you're discovering on the script, you're discovering on the thumbnails, you're discovering on the pencils, you're discovering on the inking, and then afterwards you're editing and you're switching dialogue around and you're changing scenes up. That's the method I prefer because you are creative every step of the way. With working within a bureaucratic structure like a big publisher, you are primarily, your first job is to communicate with the editor clearly, and then they're able to give you feedback and give you notes and clarify bits that they don't think is quite clear enough and all this kind of stuff. So once the thumbnails and the scripts are done, it's on to inks. But you're kind of locked in then. You can't change the story after that because perhaps it's been copy edited or it's been proofread, or you can't just throw in a new scene with the characters because it will change the page count, which there's a set page limit that you can go up to because then the price of the book goes up. There's all these other, and then it messes with the page turns, all these other things. So yeah, for reasons that to do with working within an editorial workflow, you have to nail it down. So it's like nailing down a script for a movie or something, and there's no changes after that, maybe. So yeah, once the script and layouts are done, that is it. That's kind of like the really hard creative stuff has been done, and then it's onto the kind of muscle memory things. So inking, coloring, stuff like that, which it's less creative for me. It's more, I know I can do it. And then it's put the podcast on and occupy the other side of my brain that is usually thinking about writing and changing things and possibly making things worse. Who knows? But yeah, trying to switch that off and just concentrate on the next job in hand. So it's definitely that kind of Wealth of Nations thing that everyone has their speciality, but my brain has the different specialities, and then after a certain point, I can't really change things, which can be a bit frustrating, but I understand why it makes sense within the way that the book industry works. So I have to, they have a square hole and you have to be the square peg to fit into it. You can't really, editors are so overworked within the book industry. They're juggling so many projects that you can't mess them around. You can't make life harder for them. It's just totally unfair.
No.
I understand how overworked they are. So, yeah, anything you can do to make their life easier improves your longevity within that area. They will more likely to employ you again, maybe, if you're not seen as a troublemaker, perhaps. But yeah, so these are the really different ways that I have to work, and the kind of culture shift, the way my brain works has to shift with it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were talking about, like, the post writing and thumbnailing or layout portion becomes production. Okay, I can just, because you have to sort of be in a non-distracted world when you're generating, when you're creating something, when you're really trying to connect to that excited part within yourself about the thing you're working on. That's the moment, like, okay, I need either silence, I need music without words, I need to have my tea, or whatever the thing is that keeps you sort of in that zone. But then there's other work that you can you could have a tennis match on and just keep and go to town with some of that stuff. So I marvel at some of my friends who are longtime inkers, and they've got movies on. They're working with a movie on. Like, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I've not to say I haven't tried it, because I tried it and failed miserably, but but I totally identify with that. Do you have specific things you do to keep yourself honest and task oriented while you're working on these things? Because, like, specifically for these graphic novels for publishers, you're working outside of your comfort zone. I could also find that to be a harder entry point on a daily basis of going, oh, okay, I got to do some scripting today and I don't want to script. Like, what do you do to try to make yourself be a good person?
I just kind of, I look at the deadlines usually, because the deadlines are just so hard as well that keeps me scared. Literally, sometimes I look at, okay, I've got to do X number today. And it's like you say, you are within comics, you are constantly kind of juggling the creating and the producing. The fact that it's a comic book, you can't get away the fact that you have to produce. You have to come up with the goods, because there's no one else who's going to come up with them for you. So I just try and set myself, like at the minute I'm trying to do 4 pages of script and thumbnails a day. I don't always do that. Sometimes my day then comes an evening, and then inevitably comes a weekend. Sometimes I get my 4 pages done. Sometimes I get 2, sometimes I get 1, and I feel guilty and horrible. But tomorrow's another day. You just have to start again. As long as I keep sitting down and doing it, and as long as I get scared about the deadlines, I can I come up with the goods. And also, I tell my editors, I say, yep, I'll do everything I can to meet this deadline. Life happens, stuff happens, the car breaks down, the dog gets sick, blah, blah, blah. All these things happen, but I will do my utmost to meet this deadline, so this book keeps its slot, so this doesn't make your life harder. And I try and keep my word whenever possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you go over. We're not machines. We're not, you don't input, toast and a cup of tea and some Brian Eno in the background, and then suddenly you've got 4 pages of wonderfully creative work at the end of the day. It just doesn't work like that. I wish it did. No. I so wish it did. It would make life so much more predictable and easy. But if you don't come up with the goods today, you have to make up the time tomorrow or at the weekend, or ask for an extension. I almost never do that. I try not to. I guess I've just been doing it long enough that there are days when I'm massively distracted and I want to do anything else but do this particular thing that I've got to do today. I'd rather look at Twitter. I'd rather look for books on eBay, all these other things that I like to do. I then try and turn them into a carrot rather than a stick. The stick is a deadline. Okay. It's my guilt. It's my shame. And then the carrot is, if you do this page, then you can have 5 minutes on Twitter, or you can go make yourself a coffee or whatever, or then you can maybe in the evening you can look at eBay and buy this used paperback that you already have somewhere in a big pile but you can't find, so you're going to buy a second one. Just all these tricks that that you have to come up with, but in the end the bottom line is you have to do the work. But like we've mentioned, the production and the creation and this kind of balance, you're always trying to keep them both, juggling both. You don't just want to be a machine cranking the stuff out, but there are good aspects to the production side, whereas if I'm inking, then I know I can listen to music, I can listen to podcasts, I can go to a cafe and do some work there. If I'm writing, there's no way. Like you say, I have to have wordless music on, I have to have silence, I have to have my cup of tea, I have to sit in my special chair with my blanket over my legs like an old septuagenarian, and that's my way to get into try and force myself into the mode, if I don't reach the flow state, that wonderful shining light of the flow state where it all just comes naturally. It rarely ever does, but that's what I'm trying for. So discipline is there, but I don't always have it.
It's like meditating. You can sit there and you can do the thing. You can sit down, you can close your eyes, you can be in a comfortable position, you can pay attention to your breathing, but you're thinking about things, and you have it had, wait a minute, no, and back to the breath. But so the working thing is not too dissimilar in that respect, because it's a balancing act to keep on that edge of that creative bubble that you're moving forward on, not the creative bubble that you sort of sink into and just kind of go wallow around in it. You need to be sort of moving that bubble forward, and it's tough. I have to do a ton of things to try to keep my brain sort of in shape to keep working, and I somehow forget what all these little tricks are. Like I'll next thing I know, I'm like not being productive, and I'm like, why am I not doing the things that I know will get me back on course? And so like I've been using the Pomodoro method, which is at 25 minutes of work with a 5-minute gap. And man, like 4 hours goes by in a snap. because you're hyper focused, and then you can write an email or make a tweet or whatever the thing is, and then get back to the work thing. And it's so great because you are super productive. But that combined with preparation, like knowing what you're going to do that day versus just sitting down and just making it up as you go along, that's really rough because you can spend that 4 hours not being super productive.
Do you have to be productive? And I'm always slightly wary of the word productive, because what is productive being creative? I mean, there's always this tension there. Are you just spinning your wheels? You're repeating things you've done before, or you're pushing yourself in new directions? I mean, you can't push yourself every single minute of every day. It's just not how the brain works. Sometimes you push, and then sometimes you sit back. You have to produce because it's comics and it requires an awful lot of work, and yet you don't want to just be churning the stuff out like a hack. So it's always, or you feel like you're just turning the stuff out. So yeah, it's always this kind of delicate balance.
I mean, what do you define like internally? And I'm not saying like, oh, well, I felt I'd hacked this, but I mean, what is it that you would say like, I totally am a total hack looking at something you either wrote or drew? Like what makes a distinction between, okay, I'm okay with that versus,
If I go, then I will change it because I can't live with my, But if I can reach an accommodation where it's not, it's like, okay, not perfect. My best drawing from this angle perspective is a little bit wonky, but it's good enough for today because, there's only so much I can do. I'm not aiming for perfection. I'm aiming for the best I can do on any given day. And if anything stands out as then I'll change it. But sometimes you don't have to. You're just not given the luxury of time to do that. So sometimes, occasionally, an sneaks through, or you don't even realize it's an you look at it several years later and think, how? But for me, when I look at things, the thing that's in front of me now is the thing that I'm going, am I just the worst ever? Is this rubbish? I don't believe in it anymore. Whereas I look at something from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I think, why can't I draw like that anymore? Why can't I access the Andi brain from, go back in time and draw like him? So yeah, it's just the weird aspects of this job that, old stuff looks way better than the stuff you did this morning, but give it time to mature, like cheese perhaps, or wine, maybe you'll see the good stuff in it.
It's so interesting you say that, how there was a point 10 years in and near the end of my comic career as a penciler where I was talking with my friend and studio partner, and we were both lamenting our current work versus our old work. And we both acknowledged that we had better technique than it was 5-10 years ago. But there was an X factor in the quality of the drawing itself that just seemed to evade what we were doing. In time, I think I've chalked it up to this process. So like you get better at things and you start learning new skill sets, and you kind of layer, they're like sheets of like sketch paper, tracing paper that you keep layering over something, and you lose clarity and vision, but you got all these layers of really, really cool doodads that you're able to like pull off. And it felt like, because you would first start, we started originally, white piece of paper, blue pencil maybe, and then do your final drawing on top of that. It was very direct. And then we went to these more cumbersome methods of drawing on copy paper and light boxing that below, and which creates a beautiful finished image, but the zing wasn't there anymore.
It's the classic, the thumbnails that I'll do my sketchbook, the little scrappy ones. I'll try to recapture the energy of that within a finished page, or within even an iPad Procreate layout, and just not be able to do it. It's just, there's so many intangibles that we're not machines, unfortunately. We just can't produce this kind of thing on tap. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it's by accident, and sometimes we're totally in control of the tools, and it never seems to be forever. It's just kind of a brief moment that you completely on top of your game, and then you kind of go slightly off the boil again. But it's part of the job when you're in the weeds of it, that you notice these kind of peaks and troughs, and then you can like step back and see, what was good, maybe what was not good. But I always try and not beat myself up. There's so many other aspects of creative life that are hard, emotionally, psychologically, that, just don't be your own worst enemy. Cut yourself some slack, give yourself a break. You're doing your best you can. Occasionally, no one's perfect. It's just do the best you can, and then put it aside and then fix it later. But it's okay to not be perfect, and it's reaching for perfection is definitely something that can really destroy the joy of creating. So enjoy what you're doing. That's what I always try and remind myself anyway.
I think that's a great way of putting it, that aiming for perfection will destroy your joy. Like it can really do that. You're right. I was trying to think of a parallel when you were talking about the sketch to the drawing aspect of, like, on the writing aspect. Like, what is that loss of dynamism from the original story idea, like on a writing end? Is it how do you start your stories? Do you like have a premise and a character and you write like a log line, or how do you capture that first, here's what I want to do? Do you have a way of doing that?
With the book tour, something that I had was a book of photographs by Auger of Paris, kind of a turn of the century photographer, kind of influenced surrealists. And I bought that book at San Diego Comic-Con maybe 20 years ago. And I thought, there's a story in here, but I don't know what it is. It was only 20 years later when I had the idea of someone who goes on a book tour. Why? Where would he go? And then I kind of put it together. I had the idea for like a character, who would not fight back. So someone that things would happen to. So that was an important part of the story. And also, where would this take place? So the visual aspect then went ding. It'd be like these empty streets of Paris that Auger photographed. So I have like a theme or a character or a situation, which is kind of like the part, and then it has to glom like two pieces of Lego to a visual part. And when I have the writerly part, the visual part, then I know I've got a graphic novel. But many times I've had a writerly part and I've just not had the art style or the character or the reference book or the visual bit, or vice versa, and they haven't worked. It's when you bring them two together that ping, that's when the sparks start flying for me. And then I hit the scrap paper with a pencil and I just start writing notes and ideas for scenes, dialogue, perhaps characters, situations. And I don't have a structure in mind. I just like put down ideas and they all go off in different directions. And then I get terribly confused. I have a big ball of kind of string. And then I start snipping away and trying to break it down into overall shape. What happens in this story? What is the overall arc, if you want to call it that? And then break it down into scenes. And then eventually I've kind of got a synopsis. And then as long as I've got a skeleton, then I can work from there. I find I need that kind of structure underneath. Otherwise, I then can't build on top. I need a clear picture of where I'm going. So I've always struggled. I've tried to write prose. I've tried to write novels. And yet when I sit down and have the keyboard and then, I can write words now, I just totally fall apart. I just can't do it. Whereas with graphic novels, with comics, I can kind of, the structure's there, the pages are there, the panels are there. Something about my brain that I can put the pieces together that way. I start with small, like very kind of small things that I think will be the base idea, then build them up, make a complete mess, confuse myself, drive myself crazy, and then kind of cut back in and try and find what I was looking for at the start, but with more flesh on top. And I really love that part of the process. That's my favorite bit. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. You don't know when to have a story and if it's going to be any good, but I guess that's part of the high wire, part of the joy of creating it. Then it's going to be the best book you've ever done. It's going to be incredible. And then the reality is it's the best book you can do at this time. But yeah, the potential, the next book is going to be the best. That's just the fun bit. And then it's the it's the hard work of making it happen.
Yeah, it isn't much different than novel writing. I mean, it really is. That first draft is the best. There's very few things when you're drafting something that match, an experience of creation. Like, this is it. This is great. It's a mess. And what typically stops a lot of people, whether it's making a comic book or writing a book and probably even writing a song, is this. Our engagement with anything that we love is a finished product. So we hear that Brian Eno song, we read that novel, we read that comic book. All those things are finished and complete. They didn't come out that way. They weren't magically conjured. So when we give ourselves permission to make something, we go, oh, it doesn't look like it's supposed to look like, or it doesn't sound like it's supposed to. A lot of people go like, I guess I can't do this, and they stop, or they struggle with it, where it's that first draft, it's that knotty ball of yarn that is fantastic, because at that point, with all those pieces touching each other, you can go anywhere you want to go. Like all those synapses are connected. And that's when the work begins. And you go in there with your tools and you pull it apart and you tease these things into proper shapes, whether it's sonically or literally or visually. And it's the best. And it's being able to be okay to be a piece of shit when it comes to creating stuff is how you make something really good.
I think I can't agree more with what you said, that you give yourself permission to create something, which is the greatest gift you can give yourself. It's just, if you can make the next step, if you say to yourself, you can do anything you want and you can create something, and then the next step is doing it. I think the thing about the debate about AI art and people who are really high on the AI art thing is that they want the finished product and they miss all the fun bits. The finished product is great. Fun bit is giving yourself permission to create something and the process of creating it. That's the best. The end product is great, but it's the journey thing, man. That's the really good bit. If you miss all that out, you're missing all the joy of creating. I mean, and why else do it if you don't enjoy it?
Right. Yeah. It's like travel. Like, I mean, not that flying in planes for long distances is fun, but like, let's be a little more sort of ground level, but like taking trains and buses and, in an automobile to faraway destinations is really the movie Vacation with Chevy Chase is the journey to the location. It's not the being at the location. That is nothing to do with the film. And that's what the whole creative process is. It's that getting lost. It's the running out of gas. It's all those things. It's the spotting the thing that you did never expected to see. And that's what makes the day. It's what makes the work. I love technology. AI is an interesting tool, but it is not a thing that is replacing something. It's just another thing. It's just another tool. Like, they hated the electric guitar when it showed up, and it probably was ridiculous in the hands of a lot of people for a long time. But ultimately, some people with greater skill and taste and understanding get their hand on a thing and make it sound phenomenal. Whatever. We'll see what happens with AI, but we can't judge it now. We just have to accept what it is.
Yeah, maybe we'll all fold it into our processes somehow, and it will help us make things that are interesting and good. We will see. Yes, it would be nice. A machine would tell me how to use a semicolon. That would resolve a long-standing issue of mine. But yeah,
right. That's fine. If that's what the culmination of science comes to for yours and my benefit for this one specific thing, I'm okay with that. Space travel be damned. So how do you go about pitching this graphic novel you're working on? Like, what do you produce and send off to an agent, or I don't know if you work directly with the publisher or do you work through an agent? How do you go about that?
in the past, I've just finished books and I've sent them out, and then sometimes they've been published and sometimes they haven't. For this book, Punicorn, that I'm working on now, I first approached an agent because I just was running up and a brick wall trying to get the book tour published. I did eventually, in a circuitous route, first through my publisher in France, and then the French publisher sold English rights. It was this whole, real depressing process of it was great, it worked out in the end. It was just really hard finding an English language publisher for the book tour. Anyway, so I was kind of thinking, okay, I need to get an agent, I need to work in a different way, perhaps I need to work on something that publishers are looking for right now, which is a graphic novel, middle grade and YA and stuff. So I took a bunch of ideas to an agent that I'd been introduced to, and we kind of hit it off. And she said, okay, I had one of the ideas called Punicorn. It was just one image, and it was nothing more than a single paragraph. And that was my pitch, which isn't going to cut it. So she encouraged me to say, okay, develop this. You need to do like 10 finished color pages of artwork, and you need to do a detailed synopsis, so several thousand words, Word document broken down into chapters and scenes, so you describe everything that happens. And then she said, and I hate doing this, I hate pitching because it feels like you do all this work and then nothing comes of it. And I resent that hugely. I could have created a whole graphic novel by now if I wasn't wasting my time pitching to these publishers who don't accept my pitches. Anyway, so yeah, she lured me in bit by bit. Do some more work on this synopsis, and then develop a bit more, and do a few more pages. And so 10 pages became 15 or 20 or something like that. So in the end, I had like a 10,000 word document with the synopsis, and then it had 20 pages of finished color art, and then it went out and then she pitched it to various publishers, and then eventually got picked up.
Wow.
So yeah, if it hadn't been for having an agent, I would not have gone through this process because, like I say, I hate pitching, but it seems to be a necessary part of the whole thing. The fun bit for me is developing the story. If I've already developed the story, kind of like, okay, well, I've eaten my pudding and now I have to eat my greens and eat my... and drink my drink water or whatever. Yeah, it's it's a bit counterintuitive to me, but it's the way that the industry works. So you have to like work the way they work. So yeah, that took 3 months.
Okay. The two things that I can tease out of that is, one, the glib thing is that creating pitches is like dating. You have to do that to be able to figure out who the person you want to spend time with for the long run will be, rather than just go, here we go, we're in this. And that makes for some terrible after effects. But the other thing is that it's like when I was in art school, I had this, I think it was my drawing teacher, my painting teacher, my first year. So the foundation year where they make you do all the things you don't want to do. And they were like, listen, the more you paint, the better you're going to be at drawing, and vice versa. And the idea is that you need to solve problems in different fashions with different tools to be able to do the thing that you may want to do. And I think doing things like pitches, writing the dreaded synopsis, which is the worst thing in the world, doing that makes you understand the story so much better than if you just made the story, because you have to think about it. And that, because like your brain is the best Andy Watson brain in the world. And the more you can make the Andy Watson brain understand what the Andy Watson brain can do, the better it can perform and produce. That's sort of kind of where I think they pitch.
Clarifying process, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you're communicating. No. But you're saying you're communicating with the editorial people, but ultimately you're communicating with the reader. And I think if you can really push that communication, if they go like, "Oh, this is great. I get this. This all makes great sense." Well, it's going to make great sense to the person who's never seen it before.
That's why it's so painful.
Right. I mean, I'm sure everybody, like, while everyone is super happy they work at Pixar and they make amazing films, and they're all, oh no, like, because someone's like, it's not working. We got to break it down and redo it again and figure it out, because that's what you need to do to make the thing amazing. And we have to be our own little Pixar in that respect.
And it's the hardest thing to do. Yeah.
What is what is, like, for you, like, the hardest thing? So I'll share first, so that way you won't feel so on the spot. But, like, putting like the idea of the synopsis, like, I can write a 200,000 word book. Now, I'm not saying it's a great book, but telling you what the story is in, like, a page worth of information is the hardest thing for me to do. So much so that, like, I will rewrite the book 4 times before I have to do that again. Like, that's how much I don't want to do it.
Yeah, similar for me. The synopsis is really hard because you are kind of pinning yourself down to what the story is before you've really kind of even started. Like you say, you will write the book first before writing the synopsis, which would be my preferred method probably. But yeah, I develop stories myself, not via plot, but by character and dialogue. So that's I discover as I go, as I work on it, which is fine. But you can't say to an editor or a big book publisher, trust me, because they've never worked with you before.
Sure, right.
You have to show you can do it. But yeah, the synopsis is so hard. I don't know what the book is going to be like until I've spent a year on it, and yet I have to sit and write and nail down every little bit of what this story, or a lot of what this story is, within several thousand words before I've even started on designing the characters yet. It's counterintuitive to me, but I see how it makes sense to clarify your thinking and also communicate with people who don't live in your head.
Right.
which is what being creative is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's like cheating, letting the characters write the story for you. Like there's part of this kind of like, don't worry, it'll happen because the characters will figure it all out, and that's great. But unfortunately, you have to sit at a keyboard to do that or with a pad of paper for however many months or years it takes to do such a thing. This is a confession.
Yeah, I mean, I find that I will convince myself that X leads to Y, or this plot point works, and yet I don't really know. Or I don't know yet. And when you write a synopsis, you have to produce the goods. You have to, see why, tell the editor why X leads to Y. You can't just, fudge it. You have to clarify your thinking, and you can't hide behind, it'll all come together in the end. You have to do the hard work, which is why I dislike it.
It's the equivalent of doing the manual labor of chopping a stack of wood or building a thing where your muscles ache and you're tired. Your hands are sore, but you're like, I did the work and it feels good, and I know that it is solid. And I think the same thing happens after a real focused, hard day of writing or drawing or whatever the task is.
Yeah, and it is hard work. That's the real brain heavy work of the process, which is hard to do in sustained bursts. So I'm doing this thumbnail stage now, which is the bit where you make or break a book. It's where it works or it won't. So you have to put in the work, and it's really hard on the brain, and desperate for a break. But it has to be done. So this is it. This is where it all goes down. So,
and you're thumbnailing in Procreate?
I'm thumbnailing and scripting on paper first, just trying to get the dialogue right, because I'm working from a synopsis, and then I take my scribbles and then I kind of finesse them and then do them to the right proportions in Procreate, just with grey lines, and they're fairly rough, but they're much closer to pencils than I would normally work if I was just explaining the story to myself rather than to other people. So it's hard work. But also it's kind of fun working on paper and then taking it to the computer and then working in a slightly different way there.
I firmly believe if I was, 20 years old and in art school, I'd just be like, this is all I need. I just need this and I can go make comic books.
It's very good for being portable, and also, it's obviously a really good tool to have to work with text. It's not great, but as far as drawing goes, it is the best thing the best approximation I've come to. I mean, I'm mostly pencil, pen type of person, but as far as using it for this specific purpose of doing thumbnails where you have to make changes and you have to deal with editorial notes that and you don't have to scan artwork in, which is the bane of my life. It's the most boring part of working on paper. The scanning in. If you take that part out and the dread of procrastinating, getting the scanner out and doing all that kind of nonsense, then it's good. It's a good direct way of getting ideas from your head down in a way that can then be shared with other people. So I really like it. And it does take away the need to pack your bag with pens and pencils and erasers and all the rest of it and then take it to the cafe if you're going to work there or whatever. So you just... All the stuff is there on the iPad. I've got, 181 pages done, and they're all in this little machine here, rather than a big stack of scrap paper with tea stains all over it. And it's an incredible mess and hard to find the right page and all the rest of it. As far as keeping artists also, not only is it convenient, but it's also good for keeping it neat and all together in one place, which is the number of times I've lost pages or lost a scrap note that I've made, which is a vital plot point, and then it's on a post-it note and I've thrown it away a week ago or whatever. All those kind of things you can't do.
No, that hurts. It hurts hearing that.
Have you done that?
It's the worst losing a note when you have this sort of epiphanal moment of okay, and you write it down and it's gone, because you're never going to remember it ever. It's just a goner. So I understand and I sympathize. Oh, I wanted to go back to the book tour. So you were kind enough to share it with me, and I read it and absolutely just loved reading the book. The early turn at the train station, I'm like, hey, something's up. But I thought he's just setting the character up. So this is a very steadied individual in a very vertical world. How did you come to this character? Because he's really, really fascinating persona.
Because I sort of had the character he had to kind of match the story and that these horrible things were going to happen, but he wouldn't take up a shotgun and get revenge or anything. He would kind of let it roll over him. He'd be very British and very English and would do anything to avoid an embarrassing scene, which is definitely something that I do. I will go out of my way to avoid conflict or of any sort. So it was definitely a reflection of myself. And then the more adversity he faces, the more absurd it becomes that he doesn't snap, and yet understandable to me somehow. The two had to work together that way.
It's a beautiful book. The environment, maybe I'm biased because I will go into every bookstore that I walk past. There's nothing better than the bookshop, and they're all great. You go to the ones that are this finely curated shops that don't have a ton of books, but they've got great books. And then you go into the ones which are just packed to the gills of everything. Like that one that you have in the book, that one shop is just, I mean, my spine tightened when the guy tells me how he had it organized, and I use that word loosely. But every single one is a sort of a journey and an exploration and a surprise. And the environment was just a beautiful thing. Are you a fan of Parisian bookstores?
Yeah, the very first time I went to France and to Paris, in fact, the publisher of the book tour, in fact, invited me over, and he took me to a bookstore called A Modern Regard. It's closed now, but that is the one that I based on. There's no alphabetization, and it's books to the ceiling, and it's actually dangerous to go in. Sadly, now it's closed, but that was something that stuck in my mind forever. This guy who ran the A Modern Regard, he showed my publisher some of my books that were published in America. So this weird kind of rigorous situation where there's been all these connections. But yeah, it was I mean, Paris is just great anyway, but yeah, the bookstore, Shakespeare and Company, and all the rest of it. I, like you, love a bookstore. My wife and I just came back from a trip to Hay-on-Wye, which is the kind of site of a literary festival in the UK, but it's called the Town of Books, and it's got like 20 different bookstores. So we just spent 2 days instead of going for a day. Like, we've been for a day before a day trip, and couldn't get anywhere close to visiting all these bookstores with all these run by different characters and organized in different ways. So yeah, we went for several days where we could actually sleep. Our brains could then process that, we knew more than one author, and we could go back for more. Yeah, so I love bookstores, and yeah, I love drawing bookstores, and I love books. If I could show you my studio, it is teetering piles of paperbacks, secondhand paperbacks, all over the shop. Quite dangerous, in fact. So yeah, all these things, all my obsessions, small, embarrassing humiliations of the publishing world, the books and bookstores, they're all in the book tour.
You're reading the book with visions of, publication and book tours of my own. And I just kept thinking, I've sat alone at tables at comic conventions for a little while, and it is not fun, and that's why I try to always stop at people who are lonely sitting there at a convention. I'm like, hey, so what are you working on?
You're an angel, sir, an angel. Didn't Lord's work. Yeah, it's tough, especially if you're sat next to someone who's incredibly popular. Then it just it's even worse.
You capture that sensibility with the character, but you don't make him sad. Like, he never seems sad about anything. He just seems to absorb it and move on. It's a very unique ability.
I'm not sure if it's healthy or not. In one way, it maybe is the right thing to do, to just not acknowledge the reality, perhaps. Maybe another, it's just refusing to deal with to life as it is. I think you have to have a very thick skin to work within the creative arts, and maybe he takes it to an extreme. I'm not sure, or maybe he's just completely disassociating. But yeah, I kind of admire him, his fortitude and his stoicism. There's part of me that does admire him, even though his obsession, takes him right to the end of the line. So, I kind of relate to that as well, in that, what else am I going to do at this stage? What do I like to do more than making comics? Despite all the craziness of the industry and all the frustrations, this is what I really like to do. And for a while, in the end, he makes his choice as well.
Yeah, and he's focused on the book tour. He is doing his obligation, go to the stores because that's what the publisher is asking me to do. But he has an agenda. He does not waver from this. He is consistently trying to do, because he wants to get the next book done. Like, this isn't just, I'm done. This is just part of the continuum for him, even when things go bad.
He's trying, he has a vision of the world, and he's trying to maintain it. He's trying to keep all these bits falling apart and holding them together. And do we all do that in some way? We all kind of have a vision of the world that we would like it to be, and we perhaps ignore reality and cling to it. I don't know. There's many aspects to his personality that certainly that echo some of mine as well. I mean, the working in the creative industries is a very odd thing to do, and making comics is kind of a weird thing to do. You live life and then you process it, and then you draw in little squares with little people, and then there's words above their heads. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, and yet that's kind of how I make sense of the world.
Mm-hmm. When people talk, have you watched this show or watched that show? And there's just so much out there, like you can't possibly watch all the shows. Comics are very similar. There's just so much good stuff being produced by such a wide range of creators that Twitter is almost horrible in that respect, because you get exposed to all the stuff out there that you're like, oh, I want to read that. I want to see this. I want to, and it's almost too much. But getting sunburn was that amazing surprise of going, oh my God, this is a fully formed piece of booking here. It's beautiful. And I guess maybe Twitter is another bookstore, and that's, like that big uncategorized piles.
Yeah, I relate in that there's just too much for me to get my head around. I just don't even try to keep up with TV. I've kind of totally given up on that. I mean, I try and read as much as I can, but some areas I mean, other people say this is the best TV show ever, and then I'm never going to watch it. I still haven't watched The Wire yet, so there's still a lot. There's way more TV than I'll ever be able to watch, and I've still got to watch The Wire on DVD. So,
right, and it's like television and music and books and comics. Like there's so much of it. You'll never get to it. Just enjoy what you get your hands on, I guess, is the best way to do it. And don't feel burdened or pressured because you haven't. And this is me saying this to myself, because I think I do feel that way at times. What do you do to clear your head? Country walks and reading? Like, what is the things that keep your head together?
Reading, I guess, is what I do when I'm not working. Obviously, I spend time with my family. I like to go for walks. I like to do exercise. I love to leave the house occasionally, just not happening at the minute. But when the weather improves and when I'm not under a strict deadline, then I like to go out and cycle and experience the world. I like to eat out, and but I mostly, I guess, I read. And again, that I like to read prose because it's not work. I'm not analyzing a comic and wondering why does this work and why doesn't this. So prose is my place where I go, where I enjoy art without having to judge or without making it work. And I would kind of love to write more pure prose. And yet I do worry that the love that I had for comics is different before I started making comics, in that the more I know, the more analytical I get, the more judgmental I get, and it's really hard for me to just enjoy a comic the way I used to. So I try and reserve the world of prose as a safe place where I can go to where I'm not engaging in all the analytical stuff around this being a career and all the rest of it. So I'll try and read a book a week and just read short stories and stuff in translation and different genres, and just that's the place I go, and it fits nicely with my obsession with buying secondhand paperbacks from eBay and going to secondhand bookshops and all this.
I mean, it would be a terrible, terrible hobby to have if you didn't read.
And yet I do stack up these unread books.
I'm sort of like at the tail end of a book right now. And I'm, so when you hit that sort of last quarter of the book, you just want to keep reading because it's usually the most insanely fun part. But I get a lot of reading for the show, and that stuff naturally has to go onto the top of the reading pile. But then I open your book, and not too long later, I'm like not thinking about anything else. I'm just into the stories. So I'm fortunate in that respect.
Have you found, do you have any, have you lost your love of prose from being a practitioner rather than just a consumer or a reader?
Great question. With prose, It is me trying to figure out how they're structuring scenes and how they're utilizing the arcs. Like, why are they closing this arc at this point? Like, when I feel like, oh, this was definitely an arc that was open and this is a promise being made, it feels soon for this. Or that sensibility of like, I feel like there's a whole bunch of loose threads here. Why are we not wrapping this up? And there's only 50 pages to go. That's that kind of stuff. So, but it doesn't diminish my desire to sit down and open a book, because I think if the person writing the book is doing their job at the level that they want to, I won't be distracted. So great writing is invisible. It steers me away from books that maybe I really liked 20 years ago. I guess maybe you get a bit more discerning. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that by being a practitioner, it's changed your taste in books, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
What kind of books are you drawn to that you weren't drawn to before?
I'm much more interested in literary books than I was. I like reading Murakami now, because the exciting, fun books that I used to like to read, they hurt my head because there's so much wasted stuff happening in the books. If that makes sense. I don't want to be derogatory towards a genre or any author. It's just, I mean, I'll reread Fritz Lieber because it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
If the ideas are cool, I'll overlook a lot of the other stuff too.
So you said you write around science fiction or speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you feel you have to write long because the market demands longer books?
I wrote the story that I wrote. Then I looked into what the sort of the accepted requirement was. Like, hey, how long are these books? Because I didn't know. I read what I like, and I wrote what I wanted to read. Thankfully, I was in the area. I wasn't a million miles off either.
I'm fascinated by the way the market, skews the medium and it makes on writers. I just think it's strange that science fiction or fantasy demands trilogies and demands long books rather than short ones. I mean, it's a massive generalization, but it's just weird that how that works.
Listen, they're businesses, and the businesses need to figure out how they can maximize their return. It's why the American television industry is, if we greenlight a show, we're going to run it till the wheels fall off of it. Like they don't go, we're going to do 3 seasons and we'll be done. I think the companies feel that the buyers expect X, Y, and Z. So they expect that cozy mystery to be this long. They expect that fantasy book to be fat and thick. All these kind of elements. That may be the norm, but I bet you a great story will get published under whatever size it's done. I would hope.
I'd hope so too, yeah.
So you're working on Punicorn right now. You're a few months away from starting your finishing artwork?
I am on book 2 of Punicorn. I'm contracted for 2 books. So 1 book is done already. It's going to be out in the fall this year, hopefully. So I'm working on book 2, which is going to be out in the fall 2024, hopefully. I've got till mid-March to thumbnail this book. Then I've got to ink it by the end of the summer. Then I've got to have it coloured by mid-November. So that's my year.
Wow.
I got my schedule in January or something, and that's it. This is my year. So there goes summer and most of the fall as well. So yeah, I mean, this is it. I've got a year of work ahead of me, and it's weird knowing that this is what I'm going to be doing all year, but this is what I'm going to be doing all year. So it's got to be done, and I'm going to be doing it. So
at least you can know that you have something to do.
That is the nice bit of knowing that I have work lined up and I'm going to be paid. So at some point, which is lovely to know, because usually it's just the other way around. I'm doing work and I don't know if I'm ever going to be paid. So this is a nice it's really nice to be in a position like that and know what income I'm going to have this year, which is great. Knowing that I've got to do nothing but this all year is kind of worrying, but yeah, it's just going to be what's going to happen. So yeah, I can't say I'm looking forward to it right now, but once I've done this bit, once I've done the thumbnails, then yeah, it will be. I can listen to podcasts and I can leave the house perhaps maybe. So yeah, it'll hopefully get easier after that. I've done the push the rock to the top of the hill and then it'll go down a bit. So yeah, but yeah, that's my year. And I've also been working on a sister book for the book tour, and I've got that scripted and thumbnailed, but just haven't had time to draw it yet. So we'll see what happens. Maybe towards the end of the year, maybe I'll get to work on that. I have no idea what's going to happen with Punicorn. That's 2 books. And the book tour sister book is not a sequel, but it kind of sits together in a way, kind of mirrors the book tour. So yeah, it's not a sequel and it's not a prequel, but it's kind of cheesily say it's an equal. But yeah,
there you go.
And I think it's a really good book. It's been a lot of fun to write and draw and kind of work with the book tour and then kind of work around the gaps. And so it's been really interesting, but I've just got to draw it. So instead of talking about it, I've got to sit my butt down and draw that next. But that would be nice to, get back to paper and pen and stuff and change things up again. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, for once, I know what I'm going to be doing for all of the year, which is nice.
There's great relief in that, and I think if you can balance that out with the high wire act of making your own thing, I think you can kind of sort of a nice yin and yang of life.
That would be perfect. I wish I had time and the mental energy, the mental battery to do both, but I can only do one right now. But yeah, it'd be nice to have both going at the same time. That would be my dream. But the universe isn't conforming to my dream just yet, but we'll see.
Maybe next year you'll figure it out. Where can people find you on this old internet world?
I have a website, which is Andi Watson with Andi with an I.info. I'm on Twitter at Andi Watson. I'm on Instagram, Mastodon. I have a newsletter as well, which I release maybe every week, where I just write some quotidian anecdote about my week and maybe something about something I'm working on as well. So I release that on Wednesdays when I fit it around everything else I do. I also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Andi Watson, Andi with an I, and there I put up lots of process posts about what I'm working on. So at the minute, it's lots of Punicorns about thumbnails, how I go about it and what changes I make. And I also put up a 1-page strip about autobiographical strip every week, every Thursday on my Patreon as well. So yeah, I'm still spinning quite a few plates.
It's a lot. It's so much work to run your own creative business. The perceived luxury of sitting alone in a room doing the thing is far in the past.
Yeah, you do sit alone doing the thing. It's just that you never not doing the thing.
I'll put all the links. They'll be in the description. So when people look at the podcast, they can click on all that stuff and find you in the various locations and all the new social media platforms, because you're out there TikToking and Snapchatting away, Andi.
Thankfully,
I know.
I have my limits. Yeah, fortunate that I'm just too old for this crap. Too old for TikTok, thankfully.
Have at it. Have fun. That's all I say. Enjoy it. Thanks so much. This is an absolute joy. I love your work. I'm super excited because now I get to go find other things that you've done and read other things and look forward to things that are coming out. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun to talk inside baseball about comics and various other things as well.
Hope everybody listening rushes right out and picks everything up that you've done, because it's great work. So.
Please do.
There you go. Yeah, you can go do a book tour next year.
Yeah, I will. Hopefully I won't get arrested, but yeah, I'd love to.